All right. Good morning, everyone. All right. So as you know, Fumi asked Lovis and me to give like a brief introduction of kind of how we spend our times outside of ETH. And so I prepared this lecture called Build a Practice, in the sense of kind of what it's like to build a practice in Switzerland as a young architect. But the title is also Build and Practice. So yeah, I want to share a little bit what it's like to do the planning, but also kind of the building process at the same time. And maybe generally the presentation is a very broad overview of a lot of things that we're doing in the practice. I won't go too deep into each of them. And I will also kind of focus more on the programmatic and material aspect of things. So the office we have is called Sulser Architektur, and this is how we represent ourselves online. And we like to share a lot of work in progress things like, for instance, the construction site and so on. And we also kind of want to use the webpage as a invitation for people to interact with us. And so we're testing things like this tool on the left bottom, a pen tool where people can also annotate and write things on our webpage. I'm running the practice together with my partner, Remy Chaudin, which you can see in the middle sitting up there. We started studying architecture together 10 years ago, 2015. And after the studies, he was working on the construction site, mainly working with soil. And now he's working as a research assistant at the chair of Sulser. And maybe you wonder why we call ourselves currently Sulser Architektur. And the reason is the guy standing in between us. That's Peter Sulser. And so he's an architect, but he's also in German you say Baubiologe. So he's kind of a pioneer in using bio-based materials starting in the 60s and 70s. And a friend introduced us to him 2 years ago because he was looking for young architects to take over his practice. And so everything worked out. He passed on his infrastructure, his kind of network of craftsmen people, and some initial clients. And so this is how that was the starting story, which was now 1.5 years ago. The office that we took over was in this area, close to Hinwil in Zürcher Oberland. We are sitting right now here. This is Feldes for orientation. Because both of us, we are living in Zurich, so we kind of moved our day-to-day business to Zurich. So we kind of have these two locations. And so when we started, we had a bunch of smaller renovation projects. I will just quickly go through them. This is one example where it was a renovation. We replaced some of the windows and added this niche to take a seat. This is another example where we did a facade renovation to improve the energy performance by adding an additional layer of insulation. We had 2 commissions where we basically just added some PV panels on the roof. And this kind of also led to some bigger commissions. This is an extension project of an existing house. This is the extension that you see in the photo. It's a house from the 60s, and the clients asked to have a bigger space, kind of to extend the living room. Maybe what is also interesting, the floor plan repeats on both levels, and the staircase is right next to the entrance. So right now it's used as a single family house, but they wanted to have the flexibility that in the future they can also split it up and, for instance, rent out the upper floor. And so this design creates this axis of garden, living room, dining room, kitchen, and then garden again. And so one part of this project was sort of gutting the existing building and breaking away some of the walls. And also, so this is the connection to the kitchen, having some bigger windows. This in combination with using prefabricated wooden elements to create this extension that you can see here, the connection of the old to the new. And this is what it looked like a few weeks ago. It's the bathroom space. This one is in the upper floor looking to the kitchen. This is the extension in the lower floor where we introduced this bench with some storage space. And maybe so I think if people look at the building for the first time, they maybe see as it's like one single unit. Maybe it's all built newly at once, but if you look closer, there are some nuances, like the extension has a bigger cantilever roof compared to the existing that we can see right now. And also the plaster treatment is different for the extension compared to the existing one. All right, and so this is kind of the summary of the first chapter, which is team up with the baby boomers. So this is kind of my kind of takeaway, that we are living in a time where there are a lot of people in the 50s to 70s, and many of them don't have a plan what to do with their business and their network and so on. And I think there's a big opportunity. I mean, not necessarily to take over the office, but just to reach out and kind of partner up with also older people. Okay, this is another project which is in the planning process right now. It's also an extension, this time a roof extension. Here again, the existing house is from a similar time. It's a one-family house from the 60s. And the client asked to turn this single-family house into a multi-generation house. So right now, the house is inhabited by a grandmother. And the idea is that the grandmother and the family of the granddaughter can live together under the same roof. The building law allows to cantilever the addition on both sides to kind of maximize the space. And so as a result, you create this space down here, which has a bunch of functions. So on one hand, it's a carport. On the other hand, it's the circulation space to go up to the upper floor. But it also creates like a terrace where then the different generations can meet together and, for instance, eat. And also to mark this special moment, where the kind of garden flows through, we created only one foundation, like minimal impact. And in order to balance it out, there are these two weights connected to a tension cable to make it work. This is the side from the street where we have this window gap that brings kind of low lights into the rooms behind. Our goal is to use reuse windows to also create this irregular pattern. And the clients, they're very open to use bio-based materials. So the building is thought as a wooden structure and a lightweight wooden structure. And in order to materialize things, we did some simulation. This is a sunlight simulation showing the different floors, floor 1, 2, 3, during different times, and each color is a different season. And now this is a view inside the space in the new extension, and the area here on the floor, we want to use a rammed earth floor, which kind of acts as a thermal mass, or we also call it like an earth battery, so that during winter when the sun is low, this is the south side here, it can store the heat and give it to the space over the time, while in summer the sun is much steeper and it's protected by the roof, so this floor can also stay cold. Then another feature which is quite characteristic is the ceiling or the roof. Here we want to use sheep wool as an insulation material, and we yeah, maybe I could go to the next one. So also here we do simulation. So if you use bio-based materials for insulation, it's very important to understand the vapor movement, because it always needs to breathe to avoid condensation in the layers. And maybe some of you know this program. It's called Abacus, where you can on one hand understand the heat flow, how good it insulates, but also understand where potential issues could arise. This is another view, and maybe coming back to this topic of sheep wool, we are very much interested in showcasing things that are usually hidden. So insulation is something that you almost never see. And if you use something like sheep wool, like why don't expose its characteristic? And the idea here is to use a fabric that is spanning in between the wood structure, and the softness of the sheep wool is kind of pushing into the space, creating this pillowy effect. And we are very much interested in testing things as well. So because sheep wool has been used as insulation, but we just want to see how things work out, how well it works. So we decided to build a mock-up of this corner where the intersection of the window and the roof and the wall and facade, and really kind of understand which materials, which layer are necessary to execute it well. And so we just started and did tests with all kinds of materials, including straw and soil, and we ordered a big bag of sheep wool. Here, so this is what we ended up doing. We used these jute bags where we filled the sheep wool in, and the facade we tested straw. And so this is kind of the finished results. It now lives in the nature for 6 months, and it's doing all right. This was just the other weekend. Here you can see Alex, and I think behind there is Flo and Ohel putting the model in the right position. Okay, and so we built this mock-up, but we also interested in building other things. We did a series of furnitures this summer. This is a little side table. It's for the scale, it's like 45 centimeters high. And this table is related to the other project I was showing, this extension, because for this extension they had to cut down a tree. And the idea here is a bit to showcase the tree that was cut down. So it's basically a grid, and the tree that got cut down is kind of in the field in between, maintaining the same direction. You can see the rings, and also the idea that the grid is tapered, so that you can just put these elements inside without using any glue. It's not finished. I'm still working on it, but this is kind of where I'm at. Now, this is another example. Here, I used this I did together with a friend called Sebi. We used scrap wood, and the idea also here was kind of not to use glue and not to hide the connections, but very openly show the slotting system, and then using this tension cable to bind it all together, to tension it all together. I think here it's the wood direction should have been in this direction and this direction, but it's okay. Here's some work in progress. All right, and then lastly, this is a kitchen counter I was working on. It's also a kind of lightweight structure, and also here, instead of hiding the details, these dowels that connect the different pieces are openly displayed to the front. And so the summary of this chapter is, we are educated in like planning mostly, but nothing is holding us back from just building things. And I think this is also a good strategy, just to get started and not overthink, just build. Okay. And then so next I gonna show you three competitions that we submitted, all three competitions more or less in the past 2 months. And this is also to show that we are very much interested in cooperating with other people, and we also not shying away from doing big projects. So we are very much interested in smaller scale projects, but we are also interested in doing something big. This is a competition along the Zürich Lake, and the brief contains 150 apartments and additional office space of around 30%. Currently, the site looks like this, so it's like an industrial area, and bordering the industrial area is a natural reserve. And our idea is kind of to say the natural reserve can take up the entire site, and it cannot be used by the humans, and it's kind of just these three islands that kind of make the project. Yeah, here you can see these three volumes. It is quite big. In the ground floor is the office that is sort of set back, and then on top of is the volume for the residents. We use this curtain system outside to cover the balconies, and then maybe so this is the floor plan for the apartments. It's organized in rings, so there's the courtyard, and then in the inner layer, these are the private bedrooms. After that is the ring of infrastructure that contains storage, bathrooms, stuff like this. And then outside is the other living rooms and the kitchens. And then the curved facade is structuring the spaces of the balcony, and then outside that's the layer of these curtains. And maybe also important here, the whole building is planned as a wooden structure. So you can see in red the wooden columns. And here it was important to always have a maximum distance of 5 meters to have an efficient building. And the floor plan also shows that, so the structure is everywhere the same, but on the right-hand side, we did a test of using 8 apartments, and on the left side, it's 14 apartments. So it's kind of flexible of using different size of apartments. Yeah, so this is a view of the courtyard. Here we wanted to make a bit of a contrast to the natural landscape outside and make it a bit more exotic and playful. And this is an example of an apartment where you can see the wooden structure being exposed on this condition of inside outside. I should also say, so this was a competition that we did in cooperation with another architect that is also local to the area of the site. This is another competition. This I did with 2 friends, and the reason why we all look so tired is because I was in Zurich, Hangyo was in Los Angeles, and Kwa was in New York. So finding a time slots where we can all talk together was always a bit tricky. And so this is a competition for a visitor center in the Czech Republic of a national park. The current situation are just a bunch of scattered buildings, and they were asking to make something that is more representative, but also kind of unifying all the programs and make it easier to navigate for the visitors who go there. This was a 2-phase competition, so this was our concept model for the first phase. It's this ring that is relatively closed and with this narrow gap framing the landscape outside. And sometimes we have these moments where the roof is propped up to mark the entrance and the exits. And we then got into the second stage, and it's a view images, and this is a view of the courtyard inside, where you have an overview of all the different programs. So there's an exhibition center, and there's a restaurant, and yeah, that's that. In this competition, we just got the feedback. We didn't win it, but we won the fifth place. All right, and then this one is a third competition I did with a colleague at the chair, Sophia. It's in Switzerland. It's an apartment building with 8 units in Pontresina, so the south of Switzerland. This was the panel that we submitted, which is maybe also interesting to see how this looks like. The shape of the building kind of derives a bit from the context, so it's a bit of a funny 5-corner shape, and we wanted to create certain viewing corridors to the mountains that are in the surrounding area, avoiding certain buildings that are next to it. Maybe also. So the title of this project is Cappello di Paglia, which means straw hat, which I'll come to in a second. So there's a relatively simple roof covering this more complex volume below, and the roof is also following the slope of the site. And what is tricky in this area is that the winters are very long and the summers are short. So it's important to shorten the construction phase to more or less 6 months. And therefore, our concept was to use prefabricated elements that you can see here. It's a wooden structure that is filled with straw. And for us, it was important if you use such big elements that you kind of also can read it as such. So the interweaving of these elements kind of make the facade of the building. And looking at the construction section, it's relatively simple. You can really see that it's like only one layer. That's the hay or the straw that is inside, and it creates this relatively simple setup compared to the usual one where you have like a lot of layers in the facade. Come from inspiration. So I think it's always very important that once you do your own thing, that you're always in dialogue and in exchange with other people. And for competitions, it's always an opportunity that you just team up with other people and you learn from others and you can kind of inspire each other, which I think is always a continuous learning process and quite important. Okay, and so now this is a bit of a summary, or kind of me looking back, trying to understand what we've been doing. So we kind of say that what we are doing is biotech. So we are trying to take the best of two worlds. On one hand, we think there's a lot to learn from a low tech approach and kind of learning from the past, such as I was talking about thermal mass, local resources, and creating a healthy environment. But then on the other hand, we also have new technology today that we can benefit from, such as doing simulations, BIM, doing visualizations, and we're just open to take the best from both worlds, which is something we provide. And then here, this is a quote by Louis Kahn saying, "Even a brick wants to be something. A brick wants to be something. It aspires. Even a common, ordinary brick wants to be something more than it is. It wants to be something better than it is." And I think this speaks a little bit to our approach, where we try to pick materials that we think make sense, but they only become special in the assembly or in the connection of how they're put together. And I mean, I think you've seen on a smaller scale, the kind of furniture scale, exposing the details, and really that almost the detail is speaking for itself or making up the whole concept, to like a more bigger scale, such as this last competition, where on a big scale also the construction is openly expressed and perceived by the people. That's it. Thank you. If there's questions, we can
the picture of the from the inside of the building relation to the project.
yeah.
Is it like a mixture of techniques? How it looks like
You mean how to move the image?
yeah, is it a model and waterfall and the rendering together?
Yeah, that's interesting. So
Yeah,
I mean,
for example.
yeah, I think the reason why it's also a bit blurry or you don't understand quite what it is, it's sort of intentional to sometimes we think if we work with clients, if everything is with perfect detail, they see too much. And so we sometimes try to make things a little bit abstract. But in the end, this is just a rendering. And I use some AI tools to blur out some or create some watercolor effect on top. So it's really just digital. That's what this one.
I have a question for you. How do you actually manage your time? Like with here working, projects you do next to it, and also the solutions.
Yeah, I mean, here I'm only for 2 days, so I have 3 to 5 additional days.
Okay.
But then also, I mean, I was saying we are partnering with other people, so it's not all on your own shoulders. And that's all I can say. Oh yeah.
How did you what works? How are you sure that it works?
Yeah.
I think it looks very nice. Members think about also with like setting moments.
Yeah. Yeah. We're working together with the engineer. And we also like to push a little bit the limits, obviously. And he's calculating it. We're not yet at a stage where everything is detailed and finalized. And we do, there are some issues, especially it's not so much, I think this thing with the column and this, it's not a problem. What is more tricky is this point here, because kind of if there's a lot of load coming from top, this would break out. And so it's important in the slab to also have sort of a tension element. Yeah, but in the end, I think logically you can imagine that it's like you have a stick and it's like a balance and it could potentially work, and then you kind of verify it with an engineer who would then calculate it. By existing, you mean the existing house? Yeah. No, I mean it's more like it's like a T element, and it would stand like this by itself. But for instance, if there's a lot of snow on this roof and not on this roof, or there's a party and everyone's standing in this corner of the building, then it would go in this direction, and then this weight is countering this movement on the other one. That's basically it. And we also, this was a quite early concept stage where it's kind of funny to use these big stones. I think in the end it could be something like, for instance, we used concrete plates that are stacked on top of each other, and then using a tension cable. This beam here might be a steel beam, because we also figured if this one would be wood, then the height would be quite high. But yeah, I mean, these are T-tests developed.
In the stones, maybe like fixed in the stone, instead of fixed in the ground, or
Yeah.
it looks like
Yeah. They would be on the floor, but they would not go into the ground. So they could just sit on the ground as a weight. They don't need to be anchored in the ground. It's really just this moment where you dig a foundation, and these ones they should definitely not dangle, but they would be sitting on the ground. Mhm.
It's
Um, This one was quite long. This was also a two-phase competition. It started in February, and then the first submission was in May, June, and now the second phase was then from like August, November. So that was like 9 months. This one was very short. I think this one was like 3 weeks. I mean, okay, 3 weeks first phase, and then second phase maybe another 3 weeks. And this one was 2 months or something.
you want to answer for each one?
So this one, no answer yet. This one in the second phase, we got the answer, and this one is still outstanding.
Yeah.
5 to 7. The image shows are all done by me. Second. Oh, I see. Ah, yeah, Junko, this is I wanted to show you this one. Right. I mean, okay, maybe it's a bit smaller, but you know the issue of using modeling dry stone was that it's a bit ironic because it's just digital, but you're trying to attempt to make it like very real. But yeah, anyways, this is. Um, Definitely, I think there's a lot of potential for conflict. Good question. I mean, also besides of the Peter, we do try to get in touch with other offices that we think are interesting, relatively small, and just stay in touch. It is true that obviously, let's say, I think especially the design approach is quite different for like people that are almost half a century older than we. But my feedback was also that they are curious in the young generation, and many of them are interested in having a dialogue. Um, yeah, but I think you as a young person also need to be open and understand their situation. So I think it's just important to avoid conflict and just continue dialogue and just be open to each other and yeah. Um, yes, definitely. No, I mean, well, it's a tough question, but I think everyone's also different in a way, and maybe while picking crafts people or architects, if you want to also kind of find people that are a bit more open-minded, because it's definitely true that I also encountered some craftsmen on the construction site and they had their way of doing it, maybe we wouldn't want to work with them again, but they're definitely also, I mean, we have an amazing woodmaker. This is also the guy that allowed us to build the mock-up in his workshop. He has so much knowledge and is very open, and so there are people. Yes. Okay.
think Zürich will make us kind of great improvements. I think it's really impactful also for us. And remember that the baby games, and also this new field, we were pitching for this next generation that all the knowledge will try to convince the layers only 55. And the case is also those in 70s, so it's kind of this it's meaning that also not we don't know what but we all know that this is kind of early data business, but they're already kind of really like this organization out of the, let's say, all positions. Just big, just not like this. It's very easy to guide elements of business into themselves. And it's kind of a styles that's that we want to kind of create more stable foundation to feel like it's both to spell it. So there's so much value in just creating and then we provide and then we create. So I think now also in myself, I'm really trying to sounds very sounds a bit crazy.
I mean,
also it's stupid just start doing drawing and don't want to do much like it's really realistic and have to discussion with people about reality check. This is the thing saying it's not possible, but anyway, we
yeah, for me, it also felt a bit funny to just write it on the screen, just because. But I think there's a lot of truth in it. Like just getting started with something is more powerful than waiting for too long and overthinking. Yeah, it's an hour. But also we don't go there. It's true that many of the early projects that we did, most of them were in this area. And I mean, we still have some projects going on there, so we would go there if there's need for the client or the construction. No. Yeah. I mean, for let's say the mockup we did at this woodworker, which is also in that area. But for instance, the furniture, I built it all here in Zurich. And there are, maybe you guys know that, it's called GZ, Gemeinschaftszentrum Zurich, there are a bunch of them. 2 or 3 of them have a wood workshop, and it's very affordable, the price to work there, and just
how you lived when the 30s and the 60s and 70s.
You just get a different
Yeah. The furniture, I got it at the Gitze. They sell wood, quite a good quality and the price is fair. And this one furniture where we used the scrap wood was just leftover wood from Humboldt. And then for the mockup, where we collaborate with the woodworker, he has like very good contacts to the förster and the guy who's taking care of the forest, so he can also pick individual trees that fit him, and he has control over the whole value chain, which I think is important to have very special first. Okay. Oh, the three, no, yes. So mostly I model with one, and most of the renderings are done with remotely. Sometimes for like, yeah, not for those images, but sometimes I use Blender. But yeah, mostly Twinmotion. I also heard that P5 is very good, so I'm considering testing P5 instead of Twinmotion. And yeah, I also use Architektur, but I'm not a big fan of Blender. All right, I think this is enough. Desk grids start, I think, today at 120, and we can reuse the same link that we sent yesterday. Yeah.